Well, joining us now in studio, we're very pleased to have Mavuso Msimang, who actually worked with Oliver Tambo in exile in Tanzania and Zambia. What an honor, Baba. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon to you and to your viewers.
Baba Msimang, you worked closely with Oliver Reginald Tambo in exile. Take us through your time together. What were you guys getting up to?
Well, I must say, looking back now, and even then, it was really a privilege to be asked to work for him. I left South Africa in 1963, initially to go for further studies. But as we were out in Botswana, they arrested the people in Rivonia, Sisulu, Mbeki, the whole leadership of the ANC. And I just thought it would be very difficult for me to continue with school when, in fact, the organization had really been hit right at the head. So I asked if I would be allowed to do military training. I did that for a year, 64, and I was back towards the end of the year. I stayed in a place called Kongwa in central Tanzania, and we thought we would be back here in this country within 6 months of our arriving there in 1964. But clearly, as they say, the rest is history, because we then stayed on. Yes, that's right. I first met OR Tambo in Dar es Salaam. He'd just come in very briefly to say hello to us, and we stood as a small group of people. He came close to me. You know, I'm a little taller than other people. And when he stood, he gazed at me and he said, "Whoa, I think we're under a protective tree here." And I just fell in love with this man and so on. So he was based in London most of the time at the time, and we had just come back. We were in a transit area. We thought we'd be coming back to South Africa, but it took a little bit of time. I myself was assigned to go and work in Livingstone in Zambia to set up a base station. I forgot to tell you that I specialized in communication, the radio communication, not your modern communication. We used to use the Morse code, tita, which is A, ta, which is B, and so on. So we'd do that, and these were high-frequency radios. You could transmit and communicate for thousands of kilometers away. Yeah.
Let's talk about Oliver Tambo's work as a struggle icon. We hear that, he played an integral part in championing women's rights. I mean, I was listening to Fringe Nwale the other day, and she was saying she was like an unofficial travel agent of the ANC, because Utata Tambo actually made her to be that. Very interesting stories that you hear. And when you look at the current political space, could we be saying we're still going to have such leaders as Oliver Tambo?
What I can say without any fear of contradiction is that he made the most important contribution to the very progressive ANC gender policies. I think the ANC, without any doubt, more than any other party, has got the best representation gender-wise. There were not very many women abroad, but he would source them out, identify good people, encourage them, and bring them into important committees. He really was extremely sensitive, and he would have addressed you as House CC and all of that.
Very respectful,
But the thing for him was that he really recognized the equality of genders, and there wasn't any doubt that you could not regard a woman in the traditional way, if that's what it should be called, as perhaps those people, those other people. No, he played an important role in that.
Let's talk about this statement, Baba Msimang. They say that every generation produces ethical leaders that are in line with the times and the challenges of that time. I mean, let's look at the challenges that were happening during OR Tambo's time. That was, of course, the liberation movement compared to now. What could leaders really lean on when it comes to morals and ethics in the way that he led? Because we understand that he was a big unifier.
Oh, absolutely. You know, the fact that the ANC was outside for 30 years and he was at the head of it. That's really not the main thing about his great leadership, that he led the ANC for 30 years. He used to really decry that and say, you know, presidents ought to be elected every 5 years.
Yeah.
But we are not
He even
in a
stood
position
down at
to
some
do that.
point, yeah.
Yes, oh, absolutely. But the thing about him is that he was an extremely humble person, very self-effacing, people person, but extremely, I mean, you didn't know what achievements he had chalked up even before he left South Africa, because he would not talk about, I did this, that, and the other. He happens to have been an extremely intelligent person in his youthful years. He was a sports person, he was an all-rounder. I don't know what he didn't play. He could swim, he was a horseman, he was all of those things. But talking about leadership, I mean, at the center of his leadership belief was morality, was ethics. You could accuse him of maybe some things, I don't quite know which, but the last thing that anybody who knew him could associate him with things that were not ethical. So he used to say, for instance, that the purpose of our struggle is to defeat the apartheid system and replace it with a democratic and ethical system of governance. He always would add ethical. So it wouldn't be enough for us to say we've introduced democracy every 5 years, we vote and there's this and
without
that.
the ethics and morals,
the ethics and morals which desert us these days, or which have deserted us, if you want to know the truth. I mean, he could not have lived in a situation of that nature.
Dr. Msimang, how do we then emulate those values, not just talk about what a great leader and moral compass that he was, but that we actually live by those principles?
It is very important that when people take up leadership positions, they recognize fully that they are doing it to serve
the people.
That you are given the authority because somebody has to take charge, but the authority is not meant to give you personally the privilege. So service to the people must be the primary consideration. And I think our people know that. You must not be subject to temptation, or you must be able to overcome the temptations which we seem to be failing. You know, the big difference perhaps between now and in the past is that you went to serve because it was very important that you do that.
Absolutely,
there was no chance that you would
enrich
get some
yourself.
privilege. Enrichment, forget about that. There was nothing to enrich yourself with. But you served because there was a need to do that. When you think about Tambo having started out as a maths and science teacher, and in the course of experiencing what the black people were going through at the time, he decides to go and do law in order to be able to defend the people. Now, he and Mandela set up this practice, and they never made any money. It was mainly to deal with cases of people who were being harassed because they were affected by the past laws, the racist laws, and so on. So service is number one.
Dr. Msimang, we're out of time. Just your message as, of course, the country observes the OR Tambo Centenary Week this week.
I am grateful that the country is beginning to know about this man. You know, he's the most under-recognized human being, and yet, had he not been at the helm, the ANC wouldn't have been able to come back here and take the lead and give us this freedom. He was friends with Mandela, but he was out there at the time and delivered an ANC that was powerful at the time and guided us to freedom.
Dr. Msimang, thank you so much for joining us.
You're most
thank
welcome,
you so much. That is, of course, Ubaba Mavuso Msimang, who actually worked with the late struggle icon in Tata Oliver Tambo.